Under the great dome of St. Peter's, centuries and millennia of history are nestled, along with traditions, dogmas, religious matters, papal successions, power struggles, and mysteries. Well, one of these mysteries is what we're talking about today, a mystery that still can't be fully unraveled even though a quarter of a century has passed. Yes, there are many truths about this story, truths that have been spoken and unspoken. There are official truths and supposed truths, or convenient or biased ones. There are many interpretations, that's for sure, and there are many dark areas that struggle to disappear, truly making room for light and for the truth. This case, the so-called Estermann case, is one of the many stains on the public image of the Roman Church. It's a story that mixes the lives of three people, the torn lives of three people, with many suspicions, many problems, many issues that involve the Vatican in other affairs. And over everything remains that aura of suspicion that is so hard to get rid of. Our story opens on the evening of May 4th, 1998. Inside the Vatican, in the state of Vatican City, there is a barracks for the Swiss Guard and accommodations for the officers. Our story begins right in the quarters of one of these officers. In fact, of the one who should be the officer par excellence, lovers, the colonel, the commander of the Swiss Guard. It's a prestigious position. It's a role that rewards the Pope's trust of a man who basically has to fight for the safety of the successor of St. Peter. At the start of May 1998, that man is Alois Estermann, a Swiss Catholic career soldier, not yet 44, as required by the regulations, precisely to become part of the Swiss Guard. You must be a Swiss citizen. You must be between 19 and 30 years old to join the troops. Of course, for officers, the rule is more flexible. You must have a good service record and have already served, used repeatedly in the Swiss Army. You need to have a good command, even culturally, at least a high school diploma or equivalent. It's clear you have to swear an oath of loyalty to the pontiff. Alois Estermann had a long career within the Swiss Guard, and like many others, thanks to the privilege of his rank, he was able to get married. Until a certain period, lower-ranking soldiers couldn't get married. Only non-commissioned officers and officers could. Esterman had married a woman, a South American woman, a woman who represented the whole world to him, a woman who, like many others, lived within the Leonine walls. Because if you think that the Vatican is like Mount Athos in Greece, where basically women can't even enter, not even as visitors, well, you're very much mistaken. There aren't only Catholic nuns and sisters there. No, there are also Vatican citizens. That is, the mothers, wives, sisters, and daughters of Vatican citizens. And there are also the wives of those who serve. Gladys Romero was one of them. The wife of Alois Estermann, the wife of a high-ranking officer of the Swiss Guard, a high-ranking officer destined for a successful career. Yes, because Estermann knew the Swiss Guard very well. Estermann had been noticed by his superior, Roland Buxbine, a long-serving commander of the Guard. Buxbine took the position in 1982 during a critical period for the Swiss Guard. That Guard was essentially founded on January 22, 1506, when 150 Swiss mercenaries entered Rome. Starting with their commander, Captain Caspar von Sillenden, they served Pope Julius II. As we were saying, that Swiss Guard had survived through the centuries, had carried out military operations, and then had initially been reduced to essentially a ceremonial corps, of little military importance but of great scenic importance, at least until the spring of 1981 at the attack by Ali Hachka, the Grey Wolf in St. Peter's Square, against John Paul II. From that moment on, a sort of crisis began within the Swiss Guard. The Guard had to watch over the Pope's safety. It was their duty as a military corps to guarantee the pontiff's security. The Vatican Gendarmerie has other duties, mainly related to public order, But those gunshots that struck the pontiff, even risking his life, caused an upheaval within the Swiss Guard. From then on, it underwent a second revolution. The first had happened many years earlier, at the beginning of the 20th century, when a Swiss officer, Jules Rapon, a French-speaking officer, while the vast majority of commanders had been German-speaking, decided to change something to bring the Swiss Guard back to its origins. After the most intense phases of the Renaissance Wars, after the period of the Risorgimento, the Swiss Guard had even lost its Swiss character. The troops were recruited locally in Rome. They were not Swiss citizens. They were Romans, true Romans, you could say, and they even spoke in dialect. Well, Rapon decided to bring everything back to restore recruitment in Switzerland, and also to bring back the old uniforms, which an urban legend claims were designed by Michelangelo. In reality, good old Aroti has nothing to do with those uniforms. Yes, of course, some of these were designed during the period when the great master was in Rome. He wasn't a fashion designer, let's just say. The current uniforms were designed by Rapon based on old sketches and the paintings of Raphael. Those uniforms that we still see today, especially on official occasions, with the dark yellow, almost ochre, the blue, and the red, the helmet that still bears the emblem of Pope Julius II. They are the work of a commander from over a century ago. But let's go back to Buxby's Great Revolution. What does Buxby do? He decides to structure the Swiss Guard as a real guard corps, no longer just for mere representation, with halberds, lances, swords. No to the soldiers, the non-commissioned officers, and the officers of the Swiss Guard. A constant commitment is required to become true choir guards. On official occasions, of course, they wear that colorful uniform, which is even picturesque, if you will, and on less official occasions, they wear the work uniform, the dark blue one with the black beret. On essentially operational occasions, they dress in a formal but elegant way, a dark suit with a light shirt and a dark tie, and underneath, under one armpit, the holster for the service pistol, the Sig Sauer. Swiss, this one too. Yes, because even among weapons, the Swiss Guard prefers, let's say, local supply. The only exception is the German Heckler & Koch submachine gun. But let's go back to Buxbeans. Among the many innovations, Buxbeans pushes for hand-to-hand combat training courses for specialization in new technologies. It essentially makes this guard a bodyguard. And among his officers, he also chooses Esterman, who proves to be an excellent uniformed officer to make a career, to the point where when Buxbeans decides to step aside, they even go so far as to set age limits, not to mention health issues. Well, Buxbeans himself recommended Esterman as his successor to Pope Wojtyla. Buxbeans officially resigned in November 1997. The resignation letter to the Pope cited family reasons. He wanted to return home to Fribourg, Switzerland. At the time, Buxbeans was already over 55 years old and had spent more than 15 years of service in Rome within the Leonine walls. It was time for change. Who better than Estermann, a proven, loyal officer? An officer who had proven to be an excellent commander already at the company level. And so he could take on the task of leading the entire Corps of Guards. The Corps of Guards is structured by ranks. There are privates, halberdiers, drummers, then non-commissioned officers like lance corporals, sergeants, and finally the officers. All the ranks are in German. Of course, it's a legacy basically due to the original nature of the Swiss Guard itself. The commander is the Oberst, the colonel. Under him, there's an Oberstleutnant, a lieutenant colonel, then a major, and two hauptmen, two captains. This continued down the ranks. Let's return to spring 1998. Esterman has only recently been officially appointed as commander of the Guard. He was reconfirmed in the position just that day. He's in his apartment with his wife, but he and his wife do not see the dawn of the next day. They don't see it because, in fact, that very evening their bodies are found. both of them apparently killed. There is also a third body near them, that of a Swiss Guard corporal. His name is Cedric Tournay. Actually, it was. He's dead too. According to the initial investigation being conducted by Judge Gianluigi Moroni, it appears to have been a double homicide, plus the suicide of the murderer himself. According to the reconstruction, Tournay broke into the commander's rooms and killed him and his wife. Then he supposedly knelt down, took off his collar, put the Sig Sauer he had used for the murder into his mouth, and fired the last bullet. Case closed. 2 murders and a suicide. The motivation. Why would Tournay have killed his own commander? And his wife too, for that matter. This opens a chapter of truths, lies, half-truths, and speculation. There are many rumors, but the autopsy shows one thing, a problem with Tournay. He had a cyst in his brain, a cyst that would have influenced his actions because it was located in the front part of the left central frontal lobe. According to the pathologist and the neurosurgeon, that cyst could have caused irresponsible behavior, a tendency to criticize authority, and to act on impulse. In short, that cyst may have been one of the triggering motivations behind the murderous rage of the former deputy corporal. So it was a crime committed in a fit of rage. This theory is supported by the fact that, according to various accounts and the conclusions of the investigation itself, Tern would have had more than one argument with his commander, not only in the hours before the tragedy, but also in the weeks leading up to it. In the months prior, Tern had been criticized, had received disciplinary notes, warnings, and had not been awarded a medal. The meritorious medal that is given after a certain period of service, and in any case, before discharge. So according to the final version, Tern would have acted on impulse, driven by a spirit of revenge, by hatred, by an irrational state, and decided to take justice into his own hands. After killing the commander and his wife who was with him, he would have realized that he had made a huge mistake and basically put an end to his own life. So that's all. Well, not exactly. Not exactly, because there's a letter addressed by Tournay to his mother, Huguette Bodin. In this letter, according to his mother, Tournay writes some strange things. He writes in an unusual way. Of course, the handwriting expert confirms that it was Tournay's handwriting, but many of the expressions don't add up. And that's one of the reasons why the mother, from that moment on, is committed to seeking the truth for her son. She doesn't accept the official version from the Vatican, which says her son acted on impulse. Maybe it was an impulse from that brain problem, and he might have committed a massacre. But is that what really happened? Those aren't the only doubts, the ones related to Tournay's final letter addressed to his mother. Is there any doubt about the deformation of the bullet it used for the suicide? Sauer is a pistol that uses a parabellum-type bullet, 9mm caliber. Yet the bullet that pierced Tournay's skull, according to the forensic doctor's reconstruction, is 7mm or 2mm less. It couldn't fit in the magazine. It couldn't be fired from the SIG. Sauer. Of course, some say that the bullet might have been damaged on impact. It's also said that when he fired the shot, Tournay knocked out or damaged a couple of his incisors. On the other hand, how he could have realized it clearly isn't possible. He's dead. But these are also small details that raise doubts, just like the fact that Tournay didn't simply kneel, but actually tilted his head back, as if something or someone was holding his hair or his entire head, in fact, backward. A strange attitude for someone who wants to commit suicide, very strange. And shadows start to appear, many shadows, one after another. Some are obvious setups, others circulate for a longer time, and it takes quite a while to get rid of them. One of these concerns, well, we're in Italy, the passionate moment. People started saying that Tournay was the lover of Esterman's wife, and that Esterman had caught them, or even that Tournay was Esterman's homosexual lover, and that the colonel had decided to end that dangerous relationship. But these are salacious matters that have no factual basis. Then there are darker shadows, much darker. They concern the past of Estermann, a German-speaking Swiss who lived in Rome for a long time. But according to some, Estermann had a hidden past that was anything but respectable. Esterman was said to be one of the many sleeper agents of the faceless man, Marcus Mischa Wolf. We discussed him in a previous video available on this channel. Esterman was said to be the big ear and the sharp eye of Mischa Wolf inside the Vatican, the mole, the Vatican spy for the Eastern services, for the Staatssicherheit Polizei, the Stasi, the feared Stasi. And yet, when the files of the former Stasi were opened and studied, Estermann's name was not found. Even Wolf himself, when he began to cooperate with Western authorities, would stop supporting this version. He would state that he never knew Alois Estermann and that he had no agents inside the Swiss Guard. Then there are the other Vatican mysteries because, as we know, it's a place where secrecy has been carefully built for centuries. In bone chest with ivory locks and a key that is essentially the tongue. Well, mysteries pile up. Some say Estermann knew about the Pope's attack or the alleged blackmail involving Monsignor Marcingus. Still, about the great mystery linked to the disappearance of Emanuele Orlandi, some people suspect Estermann is the mysterious caller, known as the American, who for a long time calls the Orlandi family giving some details, only to then vanish into thin air. There are those who see Estermann as the deep throat, who reveals some details of what happened after the attack on John Paul II in St. Peter's Square. But there is no evidence, not even a single piece of evidence. 25 years have passed since that night of intrigue, mystery, and blood, so much blood inside the Vatican. 25 years in which these conspiracy theories, these speculations, these rumors and suspicions have continued to pile up. Dentro la Storia will stop here. We can't continue. Not because there's an unwritten or written law, not because it says hic sunt leones. There are no pillars of Hercules to stop our journey. Simply, we can't stoop to what so many others do, speculating on what-ifs, maybes, or even creating convenient or parallel realities. We have told you what happened. We have also given you a complete picture of the possible explanations for the tragic deaths of these people. What we can say in conclusion is that mysteries are fascinating. Man himself is fascinated by what he is not afraid of, but he would also like to know more about it. It's normal, but sometimes it would be much better to talk. As happened with Emanuele Orlandi, who is being talked about these days. As happened with the Estermann case, as happened with the attack on the Pope, as with Albino Luciani's death and many other Vatican mysteries. We are just waiting for those who really know something to stop playing the game of silence. And speak up, bring the documents, tell how things really are, ease your conscience. It would be a big step forward for the conscience of those involved, for the respect owed to the deceased, for families still suffering today, like Dorne's mother and the Orlandis, and for all of us who live in uncertainty, an uncertainty caused by the lack of all the information, by our desire to understand and to comprehend, and by that silence, that damned silence that sometimes seems truly impossible to break.